Hello and welcome to Inside Neyland Stadium. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We're with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. Tennessee wins 56-0 over UTEP. They're now 9-2. Bigger news though, Ole Miss loses on the road to Florida. They get handed their third loss. Indiana falls to Ohio State. I don't think that that'll necessarily drop them out of the playoff picture, but with the Ole Miss loss, now Tennessee feels like they have a nice little slot there where if they can take care of business against Vanderbilt next week, they're in the playoffs. What's your kind of instant thought after this game, knowing that now it sets up for a really big in-state rivalry next week?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm thinking in there, it's senior day, so obviously a lot of guys are reflecting, and Josh Heupel talked about it a lot this week, talked about it when we talked to him a minute ago in the back there, and he said, you know, a lot of guys, when I got here, this program essentially wasn't in the shape it's in now. A lot of guys left. Some of these guys stayed. And you think about the scenario coming into today, man, when has this worked out in Tennessee's favor?
Yeah.
You really needed Florida, you know, one of your biggest rivals, to win a big game, something that Florida struggled to do in the last 4 years under Billy Napier. You needed Indiana as well, but Florida most of all, like you said, and yet it works out for you. You get a game here where, you know, outside of another slow first quarter, you dominate. You look pretty impressive. Get some younger guys some reps. Brew McCoy goes out there and gets some touchdowns on senior day. It was just a really good Saturday overall for Tennessee, and you're right, it makes that Vanderbilt game loom a lot larger. It's obviously a Vanderbilt team. I know we'll probably get into it, but a Vanderbilt team that's bowl eligible, 6-4 right now. I know they're playing LSU tonight. They've beaten number 1 Alabama. They took Texas to the wire a month ago. So that game was already kind of big because it's an in-state rival, because Vanderbilt's a little bit better. But now you're playing for a playoff spot again because everything worked out in your favor today. So I think this day couldn't have gone any better for Tennessee. And again, when you're thinking about where this program was 4 years ago, it just doesn't seem like days like this would happen. And here you go, Tennessee's right now back in the conversation firmly, I think. And you know, you need that last push against Vanderbilt to get there.
And are they back in the conversation firmly? Yes. Yeah. Is it a lock if they beat Vanderbilt? It's not, right? Because if A&M can win tonight against Auburn and then turn around and beat Texas in that rivalry matchup, they'll be in the SEC championship game, and that would be enough to push them over Tennessee. Yeah. So Tennessee could still, I don't think they would turn down a little bit of help in the form of like another Notre Dame loss tonight to Army or USC next week, or a couple other situations like if Alabama loses in the Iron Bowl, that opens up another spot. So there's a couple things that Tennessee could still ask to go in its favor, because that position is not a 100% lock if you beat Vanderbilt, but it definitely feels like they should be in a good spot, and that they should be able to kind of close the season out on a good note. Because I mean, another game, Penn State. I think a 2-loss Penn State team probably doesn't make the field, and they're losing at halftime as we record this to Minnesota. So it's just something to keep tabs on as we go forward. Let's talk about that slow start though. First quarter, things go rough. You look at the scoreboard at the end of 15 minutes and it's 0-0. And then they turned the Jets on, I think, 28 points in the second quarter. What to you was the difference between that first 15 minutes and the next 15 minutes heading into halftime?
Yeah, I think Heupel kind of touched on it. I think field position helped in that second quarter. You know, they're starting a lot of drives right here. It felt like kind of went back up to their own end zone. Obviously, you know, Jermon McCoy ends a promising UTEP drive that looked like they were maybe going to take the lead in that first quarter, gets the pick, but then it sets this Tennessee offense up at the 3-yard line, which obviously with their kind of woes in the first half, that's asking a lot to try to get out of that situation, and obviously they weren't able to. But I mean, I think you saw them lean on Dylan Sampson a lot on that first scoring drive. He's obviously been the catalyst for this offense this year. Breaks another record today. He's nearing a couple more here with one regular season game left, and then whatever happens in the postseason. But I think he was kind of the spark that they needed. And then just overall, you kind of forgot, you know, up in that press box we were talking, you know, with a couple minutes left in this one, you kind of just forgot about the way that they played in that first half. I think that they maybe overcompensated. You know, you want to impress the committee. I don't know that beating UTEP, one of the worst teams in the FBS, is one that'll move the needle necessarily, but you still want to win big. And I think, you know, the way Tennessee played in that second half, they went from playing about as bad as they've played all season, I thought, in that first quarter, to playing as good as they have. And you got to consider the opponent, but overall, I thought Dylan Sampson again was kind of the spark plug for them, and I thought Nico played solid after that first quarter as well.
I think Nico really improved his play the first 3 drives.
Yeah.
They're sitting there with like 22 total yards. Nico's throwing, I think, 2 for 6 to start the game. First play of the game for Nico should have been an interception. falls out of UTEP's hands on a route that Squirrel White probably takes to the end zone.
Right,
if it
yeah.
is a good throw. He's going to finish the game with a really nice stat line, though, which I think is really good for him going forward. Not only does he leave the game healthy, which I think has been a bit of a concern after what happened against Mississippi State and then all the drama heading into Georgia, and then maybe those final moments against Georgia, it looked like he might have gotten shaken up. No injury report this week, so who knows how shaky things ever were, but
Right.
he comes out, starts the game, gets out clean. His final stat line is going to sit at 17 for 23, 209 yards and 4 touchdowns. He does get sacked 3 times, part of that on him, part of that on the offensive line, but overall I thought it was a really positive game for Nico and company, and maybe that stat line gets a little boost to it yardage wise if Boo Carter isn't just doing the opposite of what happened in the first quarter, where you're pinned in your own end zone for most of the first quarter, when all of a sudden felt like Tennessee starting every drive at the UTEP 20 because of what Boo Carter was doing. How big of an impact has he been?
Oh, he's been massive, and I know, first half of the year they were kind of playing a little bit of musical chairs, I thought, back there. It was large. I think it seems like an eternity ago, but I know Squirrel White's got some reps back there. Jermon McCoy was kind of the guy for a while, but now there's just no question. A guy that we know coming into the season, the coaches were high on, kind of a do-it-all guy in high school, one of the more highly touted prospects in Tennessee's most recent signing class. And coming into the year, people talked about, was he going to play offense? Was he going to play defense? I mean, obviously he came here to play defense, and that's what the coaching staff wanted out of him. But when he was in high school, he's kind of a do-it-all guy, and right now he's been a huge spark for them and gives them a massive edge. Obviously, special teams is big. Josh Heupel said it back there. Field position is such a huge thing, and when you've got a guy like that that's setting you up in that field, and it's crazy because he hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but it feels like he's one break
He almost
away
did against Georgia.
and that, which would have been massive in that game, obviously, without turned out. But he was huge today for Tennessee. I mean, it can't be understated. And you're right. I mean, it set that offense up to play as well as it did. I mean, who knows, what this final score looks like, or how what we're talking about the offense right now, if Boo Carter's not setting Tennessee up virtually in the red zone every time UTEP was punting it. But he's been a huge asset, and of course Nico is back there lobbying again for him to be on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, D. Williams situation we've got in our hands, where at the end of last year, maybe they're sitting there and they try to get him to play a little receiver, didn't really stick, but I think I don't think it's fully a joke when Nico sits up there and is like, we're trying to get this guy a little bit on offense. I think truly that is like a serious conversation. I don't know how exactly you would implement that. It is tough in this offense. We saw that last year with D. Williams, where it's not just as simple as a plug and play, just get him the ball and see what happens. Like you do have to learn a lot and adjust. So we'll see what that looks like. Maybe it won't be this year, maybe it won't be ever, but that is something to maybe think about. And it's not like Tennessee hasn't tried it before with an offense that's left a little bit of room to be desired after a guy has been dynamic punt returning, because just saw it with D. Williams. And obviously I do think it helps with Boo Carter's case that there's a lot more time.
Yeah,
I mean, you're trying to get D. Williams to convert to the offensive side with like 3 weeks left in the season. This time you're doing it with a guy that's a true freshman, and he's got some years left to play. But senior class departing, there's some big names. You have a good chunk of that offensive line. You have some defensive linemen and guys kind of just all over the field. Who's the biggest one right now that you think Tennessee's going to be missing them next season?
Man, I think you always got to start with the offensive line. I feel like Cooper Mays is obviously huge. We joked this week about that stat. Of course, he's a center, so I mean, but you see that stat every week about not 24, 25 consecutive games or so without giving up a sack, and just his leadership. He's one of those guys Heupel's talking about today. I mean, he was here in this program, got here, I believe, the COVID year in 2020 as a freshman. Jeremy Pruitt's last season. He's kind of seen it all, played a lot. You can't really understate his importance. Anchoring that offensive line. He's the one that kind of jumps out, but I mean, you could pick Omari Thomas is kind of the same type of player on the defensive line too. Been here the same amount of time, an important player there. I think your biggest guys that you're looking at now are some of the juniors and so that you would imagine, like James Pierce or Dylan Sampson, that'll be gone. You would think in this upcoming NFL draft. As far as seniors, Brew McCoy, another guy that's has done a lot of things here, that don't necessarily show up in the stat line. And Josh Heupel talked about it tonight, the blocking that he gives on the edge there. And then gets his 2 touchdowns tonight, which I thought was appropriate on senior night, because it's been, coming back from an injury, got back a lot quicker than a lot of people expected. And maybe didn't have as big of an explosive of a season as maybe we thought. But I think it was good to see him come out tonight. But I would say, yeah, those two guys up front on the offensive defensive lines are the ones you're kind of looking at right now is guys that you'll miss a lot.
I think you got to tip your cap to guys like a Brew McCoy or a Dante Thornton that came in late and transferred in, but ended up graduating here and having a nice career. But also there is something about, and Josh Heupel's talked about a bunch, a guy like a Cooper Mays, Amari Thomas, Javonte Spraggins that were here when Heupel got here, did not want to enter the transfer portal, stuck it out in a really dark age of Tennessee football, and were a big part of turning it around to us being able to stand here right now and talk about Tennessee possibly being a win away from being in the first 12-team playoffs, and who knows what happens from there, because this team's certainly good enough that if you can get the offense to start to click and the defense can kind of get back to where it was maybe in midseason, then all of a sudden this team's going to be really, really tough to beat when it matters the most. But Vanderbilt's up next. That'll be Tennessee's next test, and you talked about them, a Vanderbilt team that's by no means the Vanderbilt of old. They're a team that's actually playing good football. And with Diego Pavia at quarterback, it's going to be a headache for Tennessee. It'll be something they'll have to key in on. Tennessee, you would assume, would be the Vegas favorite going into it, but anything can happen in rivalry games, even in one that's been as lopsided as Tennessee-Vanderbilt. So we'll have coverage all week up until one of the biggest games in recent Tennessee football history, given what's at stake, and also men's basketball, women's basketball, everything you need Tennessee athletics over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.